When the Western Roman Empire shattered in the 5th century, it left 1,000 years of classical knowledge exposed. Philosophy, literature, and the very blueprints of Western thought were suddenly at risk of being erased by a continent in chaos. The tribes migrating across Europe were focused on survival and land, not the preservation of Greek texts. This created a massive intellectual vacuum on the mainland, as the old libraries of the empire began to disappear. To see where that knowledge survived, we have to look past the edge of the known imperial map. In the 5th century, Roman influence ended at these stone walls in northern Britain. Beyond them lay a world Rome never touched, Ireland. Because the Irish were never conquered, they maintained an entirely different societal structure. It was a decentralized civilization of kinship groups and rural cattle lords, operating out of isolated stone ring forts rather than imperial cities. Curious. This geographic isolation allowed Ireland to ride out the collapse of Rome untouched. It transformed the island into an incubator for Western thought, preserving the very ideas that were being lost elsewhere, though the specific traits that allowed the Irish to survive would later bring about their own downfall. Early monks like St. Patrick didn't attempt to erase the native culture. Instead, they grafted Christianity onto the existing tribal structure, blending the new faith with an ancient Celtic reverence for the natural world. This produced a unique physical footprint. Rather than building centralized cathedrals in cities, the Irish built isolated monasteries in the wilderness. These communities functioned like localized spiritual tribes, independent and self-sustaining. For centuries, these monks acted as a cultural hard drive. They meticulously copied classical manuscripts, preserving the works of Virgil, Horace, and the Bible, while the rest of Europe struggled through a period of deep illiteracy. Eventually, this became an export mechanism. Through the concept of peregrinatio, or voluntary exile, Irish monks traveled back to the mainland, carrying their preserved books and reintroducing classical learning to the Frankish and Italian kingdoms. This golden age of preservation succeeded because the Irish system was decentralized and cut off from the crumbling Roman center. Their tribal independence was their primary defense. But that same independence defined their politics. The Gaelic governing system relied on a mechanism known as Tanistry. This contrasts sharply with English primogeniture. The English system relies on linear inheritance, where power passes automatically to the firstborn son. But the Gaelic system was a radial network of the entire extended family. Under Tanistry, power didn't pass from father to son. It passed to the strongest, most capable member of the ruling kinship group, the Tanistry, who was elected based on his ability to lead and defend the clan. This system prioritized military and political competence, aiming to put the most capable leader in charge regardless of birth order. In practice, however, this made every transition of power a potential battlefield, resulting in a society defined by constant volatility and internal strife. By the 1500s, this ancient system collided with the Tudor English state. The Tudors were aggressively centralizing their power and modernizing their administration. To the English crown, a decentralized and volatile Ireland was a security threat. They saw the Gaelic system as an unstable backdoor that Catholic enemies like Spain could use to threaten England's borders. Their solution was a diplomatic hack called surrender and regrant. The crown offered to recognize the lands and authority of Gaelic lords, but only if they surrendered their native titles and received them back as English earldoms. The catch was absolute. To keep their land, the Irish lords had to abandon Brehon law and submit to the English system of primogeniture. Surrender and regrant functioned as an administrative virus, by forcing the Irish to replace their dynamic, elective leadership with a rigid, top-down hierarchy. The crown effectively dismantled the Gaelic operating system from the inside. The system broke immediately. When the English tried to force a legally mandated heir onto the O'Neill dynasty, bypassing the traditional Gaelic candidates, it triggered a devastating internal civil war within the O'Neill lordship. The Gaelic lords realized that accepting English reform meant the slow-motion extinction of their power and culture. This sparked the 9 Years' War. Led by Hugh O'Neill, the Irish alliance initially used their decentralized structure to their advantage, scoring major tactical victories against English forces in the rugged terrain of Ulster. But the Irish were fighting a modern, mechanized war machine. While O'Neill relied on tribal levies, the Tudors possessed a heavily funded military administration capable of sustaining a long-term campaign. The war culminated in 1601 at the southern harbor of Kinsale. The Gaelic forces were outmaneuvered and decisively defeated, ending any hope of maintaining the old order. The symbolic end came when English commander Mountjoy traveled to Tullahoge and shattered the ancient stone chair used to crown their kings. This was a targeted termination of the Gaelic world. As the physical mechanism for crowning a king, its destruction signaled the end of Tanistry and the final collapse of the native power structure. The traits that enabled early Ireland to preserve Western civilization, its tribalism and decentralized resilience, rendered it incompatible with the centralized machinery of the modern nation-state.